Welcome to The Thriving Mama, the podcast that teaches you not just how to survive, but to thrive in motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. We have issues in this country and the world right now. We live in a society where fear and anxiety dominate, and it's causing us to devolve as people. Instead of taking responsibility, we use labels and excuses to justify our actions, or we deflect, deny, or ghost because we're unwilling to see who we are and do the hard work of change. I'm recording 1 week after the election here in the United States, and it was actually the spark that lit my fire to say something about these issues and how they are affecting us, not only us as moms and women in society, but also in the immediate term, our children, but also future generations, because we know that trauma, especially repeated trauma, affects it literally changes. It changes our genetic expression. That's passed down to future generations, not only in our DNA, but our behaviors as well. Think about it. In the past, I've spoken about, a lot of our coping mechanisms or lack thereof were basically given to us by our parents and their parents, because many of those people went through wars. It's not surprising and it's understandable, but we now need to wake up and be the change. Something's got to give, and we're going to get into all of that. If we don't change, we're doomed as a species, but I have complete faith, but it's going to take reflection, responsibility, and hard work. It's not easy, but it can be done. I've seen so many women over the years overcome so many difficult things, being impoverished, growing up in an abusive, verbally or physically abusive home, overcome like assault, so many different things. And we can do hard things. It's just a matter of stepping up to the plate and doing it. And so this podcast is going to be a little bit different because unlike others that I've done, they've been single episodes. This is going to be a multi-part series because there's just way too much to break down and unpack for one episode. But also at the end of each one of these episodes, I'm going to challenge you because this is how we make change. I'm going to challenge you at the end of each episode to reflect on what was said, and I'm going to give you a call to action so that you can be part of the solution. In this episode, we're going to focus on exactly how labels, diagnoses, and excuses are preventing us from healing and also being functional members of society. What we can do and what we need instead of that label or diagnosis, and how you start becoming more aware and identifying these patterns in yourself. If you're confused about where to start addressing your own health, or you've tried all of the things and nothing has worked, I offer podcast listeners a free global health check-in where we will evaluate your physical, mental, and emotional health and provide useful resources to help you on your journey. You'll find that link in the show notes. So before I get started, I want to give you some caveats because it's going to sound like I'm making a lot of generalizations. And while I am making some blanket statements, I am acutely aware of the fact that the pandemic has dramatically affected us. The way I see it is a crescendo. It's like we kind of hit the peak and now what? It was a slow build of anxiety and mood disorders and, just ignoring all the problems that we've had in society. And now we're seeing the outcome of those. So I'm not calling people out. I'm not discounting anyone's experience because I've lived that too. I've lived on this planet for 49 years. I am far from perfect, but what I will say is every time I've got knocked down, I get up again. And I'm not trying to quote a song because I just heard it in my head. Oh boy, Chumbawamba. For those of you who are, kind of young in the 90s and early 2000s. Oh boy. Yeah. But yeah, what I'm saying is, I mean, every time I've had a challenge in my life, and I have had many from going back to very early childhood, I've always had the, mindset of what do I need to do to survive? Or what do I need to do to change the situation, right the ship, which is partially, I think, what has drawn me and guided me to doing the work that I've done my whole life. It's, I feel like it's culminating in what I'm doing now, but it's definitely been what has guided me. So I'm not discounting anyone's diagnosis, labels, experiences, because that is all very, very, very real and valid. But what I'm saying is we need to not let those limit us and, prevent us from moving forward in life. So that's what we're getting at too, in the heart of what we're going to be discussing today. So I wanted to put that out there because I know that this episode very well may be triggering for some people. And if it's triggering for you, I invite you to do this. Identify what triggers you in this episode. Where do you feel it in your body? Because when you're triggered, something goes off on it, internally. And this is actually when we're doing the trauma work and emotional work that I do. This is exactly what we're doing. We're going after those triggers. We're going after those internal feelings. So I invite you to, if you are triggered or if this kind of pokes at you a little bit, sit with it. What were those statements? What did I say that got you kind of going that's not me. This can't be me, or she's attacking me. I invite you to sit with that and think about how your mindset and your beliefs and your identity are causing that. Why is it triggering you? So that's going to be kind of a first kind of exercise to throw to you guys. And then you'll see at the end, I'm going to get a little bit deeper into that same thing, but I'm going to give you that suggestion because I have a feeling that things might be triggering. And I know because I've been there. I have been triggered by lots of things in the past. Not much triggers me anymore. I will say that I've done so much self-growth work, trauma work, emotional work that I'm not very triggered anymore. And if I am, I do sit with it and I ask why. What is it that I don't like in myself or a belief or a mindset or something? I chase it. I chase all of that stuff now. I chase it down because I don't want it to be a part of my identity. And so that is part of what we're going to be discussing today. But the first thing I wanted to touch on are some very, very hard truths. And my audience and my patient and client population is largely filled with moms. I do work with, the handful of men, which is usually dads, husbands, brothers, somebody related to some of the women I'm working with. I also work with little kids. So there's, the males in that component. But by and large, most of my population is moms, and some of them are younger moms and some of them are grandmas. But yeah, here's a major truth I've seen in the last 25 years of my, professional existence. Moms make lots of excuses. Straight up. Moms make lots of excuses. And it's fascinating to me. And that's part of how I got here because I did it myself. I've done it too. I've been there. The whole path, so many of you already know my story. Just looking it was my, your childhood. Oh, it's the parents. Oh, it's, X, Y, and Z diagnosis. I know, a lot of you know that I have been diagnosed in the past with Hashimoto's and Epstein-Barr virus and Lyme and dysbiosis and a million other things. But I will say I've never really identified with the diagnoses. And I think that has kept my health, even when I was in the midst of the struggles, it kept me in a different arena because I wasn't identifying with it. And we're going to get into that and unpack that in a little bit. But moms make excuses. It's really interesting because in the past, I would say 10 years, but more in the past 4 or 5, when I really started focusing in on the emotional aspects of our journeys as moms, I have had 2 camps of patients, largely. Now, again, this is a generalization. I have those who are like, they get it. Like, it's not aha moments. Like, I have been given a diagnosis, or I was, they've given a diagnosis, or they were made aware of something and they've decided to change and they go all in on it. And then I've got the camp of moms who are like, they're aware, they know, but they can't move forward. They're, so many things, all of the excuses, but they're the ones who make the most excuses. They're the ones who, I don't have time. I don't have money. But I will also say, to be fair, that's true for some of them, but some of them are also choosing to spend their money elsewhere. And that's fine. You know what? If that's what you're doing at this season of life, that's fine. But it's a choice. Every day, you'll hear me say this again and again, and probably almost every episode, but you are given a choice every single day. You get to choose, how you dress, what you're eating. You also get to choose health or not health, or, vibrance and thriving in life, or the opposite. Like, these are choices we have. And it's not always easy. I always feel like I tell people, making the first step is the hardest one. But once you make that first step, all the other ones are easier, and you build on that momentum. But, and we all have setbacks. Things happen in life, but then you get back on the horse. And that's another place where I see people, just everything seems to fall. It's like, once they fall off the horse, it becomes, an excuse in and of itself. But then, it snowballs on itself. And it's one thing. And I know you all who've been listening to me for a long time know I'm a big fan of giving ourselves grace, but, an excuse, like, not having time. Like, if I asked a patient to do something and they didn't do it, and they sent me a message and was like, oh, I wasn't able to do it. Or we get on a call and they're like, I wasn't able to do it. One time is an excuse, maybe twice. But if it's a repeated pattern over and over again, over weeks, months, and years, that really is an excuse. That's like just giving yourself exponential grace. And that's, again, it's an excuse. It's not giving yourself grace. So that's something we work on at the very beginning of the programs that I do, when I do the Thriving Mama, or when I do core transformation, or even in just the straight up emotional and trauma work, sessions with people. These are things we are working on, because they are things that are limiting us. And so I just wanted to be straight up and honest. We moms make lots of excuses, but it doesn't have to be this way. We can change. And I'm going to get into all of that right now. So from the standpoint of labels, diagnoses, and excuses holding us back, the labels and diagnoses piece is interesting because it's normal and absolutely ingrained in our evolutionary history as humans to look for cause, and also to look for likeness and similarity. After all, it's what kept us alive and prospering for hundreds of thousands of years to get us to where we are today as modern human beings, right? All of that time we spent out there, in the savannas and caves and on mountains with really no shelter and no modern technology. That's how we kept ourselves alive, right? We, looked for cause. We scanned for danger. We looked for, is that, person or whatever it is out there moving, in the distance, friend or foe. So we're looking for likeness and similarity. And it literally did, like so many other adaptations, helped us become modern humans. But this is not serving us very well anymore. It's very similar to stress, right? Like stress in that same example of us, hundreds of thousands of years ago, even, 100, 200 years ago, most of what we think of society now is very, very new in human history. Our history as Homo sapiens. It's a very, very new, like tiny little dot on the timeline of human existence. And, even sanitation, think about all the struggles. Like the United States is a pretty young country, all of the pioneers and, the struggles that they faced, adapting to this new scenery and this new landscape. And so there was a lot of death and there was a lot of heartache and hardship. And, again, like that, all of those instincts we were just talking about, that kept us alive. And that same, like that stress response, if you were out there and you are like hunting for food, you want to be acutely aware of what's around you and you want to have quick acting reflexes. And that's what the stress response would do for you in that moment, right? You're going to have those peaked senses. And if you hear something behind you, you're going to turn around and be like, what is that? But eventually that stress response is going to go down and dissipate. But we're living in a society now where that doesn't happen. We're on all the time. And eventually that's going to drain us. That drains your hormones. It alters, we've talked about this, it alters all of your physiological functions over time. It alters your stress response over time. It alters your perceptions. It alters your beliefs, your mindset. It alters the lens through which you view the world. And it really changes your life. I mean, we talk a lot about the, true biochemical and physiological, effects of chronic stress, but we don't talk about all those other things. And also your nervous system, major nervous system dysregulation. So the more we're kind of abusing this like likeness and similarity and cause, the more it kind of becomes diluted. And that's what I was thinking about last week. What truly pushed me to do this episode was kind of a culmination of a lot of things happening in the span of a week or two. It was seeing how grown adults were responding to the election and behaving towards each other, pre and post, like the lead up to, and then after the fact, people just losing it all over the place. When I would say, in fact, if you think about it, these, federal elections, I feel like I've gotten a different grasp on it. I actually care more about what's happening locally than I do on the federal level, because so often it does affect our daily lives, but it's not something that, if your local taxes are hiked up by 10%, that you're going to feel that dramatically in your life. Like little, I shouldn't say little. Changes in federal government often take a very, very long time to disseminate down to the people level or the local level. There are, with the caveat of a few particular issues, which I am not going to get into right now, there are a few issues that are affected, that people are widely affected by federal change, but by and large, most of them aren't. And so the lack of people being able to understand that most of us want the same thing. Most of us, we're humans. We all just want to get along. And those little things that make us different is what makes us beautiful. It makes this human experience beautiful. And, if we were all the same, this world wouldn't be a very fun place. It would be a pretty boring place. So be able to accept people's, differences and not act like the sky is falling. Like the fact that we can't do that anymore is troubling. I also we here in Colorado, we had a massive snowstorm in the Front Range that was kind of really hit Denver to Colorado Springs very dramatically. We got like in the ballpark, a lot of areas got like two feet of snow over 3 days, up to 3 feet of snow in some areas, and the mountains got even more. But the behavior I saw amongst people was disturbing to me from the standpoint of like names being hurled at each other for not like, oh, you don't care about us because you're opening your business. And on the other token, people saying, and when I say you don't care about us because you're opening your business, this is not me. It's businesses here at large. Employees were mad because they had to go to work. Well, guess what? You have agency. Take a snow day or, take a day off. And I know for some people that's harder than others because of, the financial climate. And I'm well aware of that. But again, it's like choices. Do you drive to work? Do you ask somebody to pick you up? There's lots of options we have, but so often now we're viewing things through the lens of the victim, or everything is happening to me. there's lots of things that are going on. And so I was kind of bothered by that because it made me get to the place again where we lack empathy for each other, and it's entitlement. Everything is about me and my world. What about all the other people? So that was something else that bothered me. The other thing I saw, I know a lot of you people know that I'm a nerd at heart. I like reading for pleasure, a lot of like scientific material. So I like to read about quantum physics because that plays a role in, the energetic connection between all of us, but your connection to the universe and the divine. I like to read about quantum physics. I like to read about biochemistry and biophysics. And I also keep tabs on the world of psychology because obviously in the space that I'm in, there's a lot there. And so something that I had noticed was I get the publication Psychology Today, and I was finding that there are labels for everything. Like it's, in the actual diagnostic world, there is a guide. It's the book. It's called the DSM-5. It's the 5th version of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's what DSM stands for. And it's a publication by the American Psychiatric Association. And that's how they classify mental disorders using like common language and accepted criteria. So there's that. And then also, so that's kind of where you get the diagnostic piece. But then you've got, Psychology Today, which, I'm not going to get into like the whole thing of psychology and people calling it a soft science versus psychiatry, which is, more of a hard science. But what was bothering me was I feel like every time I open Psychology Today, they're giving labels to labels or expounding, like it's trying to normalize things that I don't necessarily think are helping us progress as a people and society and even a species. The article that particularly got me was, it was how we need to accept ghosting. And I disagree 100%. I feel like accepting of ghosting is not taking responsibility. And I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But when you ghost people, and it went on to say, ghosting is, it doesn't have to do with the other person. It has to do with, the ghost it has to do with the ghoster and how the ghoster feels about themselves. And straight up, yes, that is a person who, obviously has anxiety, might have depression, might have lots of issues, but they were never taught coping mechanisms, which is why they ghost people. So we shouldn't ghost people. No. We should teach people how to cope with life, giving them coping mechanisms and teaching them, how to deal with adversity. That is a major part of the human experience and how we got to survive and how we got to be where we are today by using our frontal lobes and using all of the, tools that we have to survive. So that one kind of sent me over the edge, and I was just really frustrated because it's like everything that we see, it's trying to normalize things that are essentially holding us back. Like I said before, this whole thing is very much likened to the stress response, because this is how I view it. It's, we're creating a society of blame and judgment, fight response, lacking responsibility, flight response, running away from things is that flight response, or you're stuck and you can't move forward. That's freeze. Fight, flight, or freeze. But this is where it's being translated into society, and it translated into our human experience. And what gets me is this is what we're teaching our kids. And that's not okay. Because if you look right now with each, I'd say, descending generation, we'll start off. I mean, we're a lot of the people who went through the wars are, they are great grandparents now. And then we have the baby boomers who are the parents and sometimes grandparents now. And then we have Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, who are largely the reproductive adults right now. the parents and the soon to be parents. And what I'm thinking about is a lot of like me, obviously I'm a Gen X. I was not taught coping skills at all, or I should say healthy coping skills. I was taught coping skills, but they were not healthy by my parents, straight up. But obviously my grandfather was in the war. I talked to a lot of, patients who they had the same type of situation. I get it. It was like total destruction in the world. And then it became a matter of like survival, like cleaning up, rebuilding, survival, right? They didn't have great coping mechanisms. They were just trying to survive. And then we were subsequently not taught that. I think generationally, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z are now becoming more aware. But what I do see is less emotional resilience as people get younger. And that's obviously, like I said before, generalization, not true of everyone. I actually have some good friends that are in their 20s. I also have good friends that are in their 60s and 70s. I've got friends of like all age ranges. But what I see, and part of this is also life experience, is that, like I said, emotional resilience and capacity to handle discomfort and challenges in a healthy way, or at least learn from it if you don't handle it in a healthy way instead of running away from it. Technology also plays a role in this. And we've talked about that before. I'm not getting into this because obviously technology is a major impediment to human communication. But you know what? We need to address a lot of things, and a lot of it starts with ourselves. And so that's what we're going to be focusing in on. And so, yeah, it just like all of those things culminated, and I was just frustrated because I was like, it doesn't have to be this way and it shouldn't be this way. And so first thing we're going to talk about is why these diagnoses and labels are a problem. What is the issue with it? The main issue is labels keep us attached. They keep us attached to something. We identify with them. It makes it very hard to move forward. You have a name to put on something, but not a why. The why is critical. The why. And it's so funny because so many patients come to me and they're like, I got not diagnosed with, X, Y, or Z, but now what? Now what do I do? It's very self-limiting. It puts you into a box, and we're going to get, into why this is, this can be a problem, that self-limiting nature in the box of labels and diagnoses. The key is the identification with them. But, it gets you also get trapped into not taking responsibility. And it's like, if I'm going to give you an example, it's like we blame it on genetics, or we blame it on trauma, or your attachment type, or your parents, or whatever else. And like I said, it becomes like these labels that we so desperately hold on to because it gives us something to identify with, and it gives us a group of people to identify with, but it doesn't allow us to move forward. I'm going to give you a generalized example. It happens to be a lot of what I've seen in my practice over the years, but this is like I said, kind of like an example to illustrate what I'm talking about. I'm going to pretend I'm Susie. I'm going to be like, I'm Susie, and I've got MTHFR and Lyme and Epstein-Barr virus and Hashimoto's and ADHD. I can't eat this whole group of foods because my genetics and my food allergy tests say so. I can't complete my treatment plan because I really just can't focus. And I'm too busy. I'm too busy with all of the things in my life. And it's just too expensive. It's too expensive because I put all of my money into buying all of the, things I see on Instagram and TikTok and a podcast that I think are going to be the one thing that helps me move forward and change my health, but it's not. Do you understand what I'm saying now when I say that? Like, this is what I see in my practice all the time. And I'm not going to get into specifics. That was just like a generalized example of, kind of a typical person that I might see. And it's, again, it's the choices. It's choices. But, like I said before, it's so much easier to not own it and not take personal responsibility. It's all of those things. I can say this too. I use this example a little bit, because I understand it too. I do have MTHFR. I'm homozygous for one copy for one of the variants, and I'm heterozygous, meaning I only have one copy, but still it affects the gene regulation or expression for the other main variant. I have been diagnosed with Lyme. I have been diagnosed with Epstein-Barr virus. I have been diagnosed with Hashimoto's, not ADHD. But I would say occasionally I feel like my brain might go that way because I sometimes feel a little bit scattered, but that's probably about 5% of the time. But yeah, I can like totally relate to that, but it's not me. That's not who I am. I don't own those. Because I know that my mindset and my inner world and my belief system affect everything much more than any of those labels do. And I'll also say this, like, I didn't think I had Lyme for many, many years. I had little like hints here and there because I did not feel well. And then all of a sudden I really didn't feel well. But I didn't really believe it till I saw it on paper because I never felt that bad. A lot of my Lyme patients feel really, really, really bad. And I think that this, like, I shouldn't say I think, I know my mindset and my ability to not identify with it was a huge piece of the puzzle. It helped me. I will say it helped me in, the treatment aspect, but I'll also say this with regard to like the Lyme, the Epstein-Barr virus and the Hashimoto's for me. I did all the protocols with the supplements and the diets and all of the, ancillary treatments that helped. It helped me feel better, but it did not help me feel great or vibrant. And what helped me do that was doing the emotional work and the trauma work and self-growth. And so that's a huge, huge piece of the puzzle. I actually had a friend the other day ask me, she's like, I've heard that trauma and, your emotional experiences can cause autoimmunity. And she's like, is this true? Because she has an autoimmune condition. And I was like, yes, it is. I'm like, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I'm like, that is like the big piece of the puzzle. All of these other little things are small pieces of the puzzle. The big piece is the trauma. And I'm actually going to have somebody on the podcast. It will probably be in the next, after you hear this episode, and then a month or two after that, because I'm going to have somebody come on and speak about that. And we're going to like talk about it together, but I'm going to have an expert come on and speak about that because I think it's something that people really need to understand. But the whole point of what I'm trying to get at with this is labels, these labels and diagnoses, they are what prevents you from having that vibrant, like healthy, thriving life that most of us really, really want. And you deserve it. It's, that those labels and the diagnoses keep you inside this little box. And I liken it to like with patients, it's like every time you get a label or a diagnosis or something like that, it's like you're inside the box and you're just putting sandbags on top of the box every time you get a label or a diagnosis. And it makes it so much harder to move forward. It's hard to lift the top of the box off when you are identifying with all of these labels. They're attachments. They're things that we don't need. They are so self-limiting. And like I said before, I also wanted to say, again, not discounting the existence of the diagnosis or how it might make you feel or affect your life. What I am challenging is not using it as an excuse or not taking responsibility for your life and owning it. That is the issue. And like I said, I've been there before. Like I have overcome all of these things and it's not easy. It is not easy. It's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and take ownership of things and not blame anything else and just know that the healing has to come from within. The other piece of the puzzle that I just wanted to briefly mention was that that identity piece, like identity shifting is a major part of the healing process. It is really, really important. And what happens for some people is as you go through the healing process, like you come into the practice, whether we're doing functional medicine, I'd say this is more relatable in the functional medicine sense, because when we're doing emotional and trauma work, we know that there's something there that we want to change, right? But for functional medicine, like you're like, I have these symptoms. I'm not feeling well. What can I do? Well, we do a history and we do tests to identify that, right? Again, we're labeling things, but it helps. The labels can be helpful. They can give us context into what is happening. But the key is, taking action on it and owning it. So we get the tests back. We make a plan of action and, we go through all of the steps. What I will see happen is people get really excited and then a lot of people feel a lot better in the first, several months of working in the functional medicine process. And then there will be some stalling. And a lot of times it is because of the identifying with the label of certain symptoms or the labels of diagnosis or other labels that we have given ourselves in life, right? Like life gives us all sorts of labels. And at that moment, I often will challenge people, like, why is this happening? Why are we not moving forward? Is it that label? So we talk about that. We have conversations about this and they're like, oh yeah, I get it. And then some people, it's a pivotal moment. They will move forward and be like, I get it now. I'm going to change the trajectory. I'm going to make different choices. And then there are some people who say, oh yeah, I get it. But things stayed the same and they keep on going through. And I've actually even seen where somebody's labs look great and yet they still feel like, they're not feeling great. They mentally and emotionally are not, and physically just feeling, they're like, I'm okay. Even though, for all intents and purposes, their lab said that they were doing well. And again, that's like, it's that identifying. It is like your mindset and beliefs and your lens are preventing you from feeling great. I had a patient way back in the day, who was this person for a long time. It was like digestive issues and energy issues. Happened to be a male though, which was really interesting. He had gone through a divorce and was holding on to some guilt. And it was the guilt because he and his ex, they parted ways amicably, but there were some things there that like he just felt guilty about. And he did not, at that point in my practice, I mean, this was a long time ago, I was not doing any emotional and trauma work. He was doing several different therapies with other people. And it was insane because his health took a dramatic change in 8 weeks, because that was the amount of time that I had seen him, the difference in the amount of time. I will often see people either every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks. And so it was 8 weeks and it was crazy. It was crazy. He went from, feeling decent, getting through life, but it was all of a sudden, he was plugged in and fully charged. He had so much energy. He was happy. He was resilient. He actually, at that time in his business, had some there were things going on, but he's like, I got it. He's like, everything's changing. My life is great. I can handle this adversity. And so that was an aha moment for me. That one I, put in the back of my mind and I've never forgotten, because it was probably the first time I actually ever saw in practice where the emotional side and the trauma and the mindset, had that dramatic of an impact on somebody's life. And I, I reserved that one and I held on to it, and it kind of set the stage for this next, portion of my, both personal healing journey and my journey as a practitioner and clinician. And so I want people to understand that there is hope. The next thing I wanted to talk about is, how do you fix it? So I don't want to say completely stop looking for labels, but kind of stop looking for labels. are they serving you? I have so many patients who get that diagnosis and then they're like, now what? Because lots of times you got that label for why you're feeling not so great, but they don't know what the next steps are. And the next steps are often not what you want to hear as well. Instead of looking for a label, this is what I think we need. And this is what I think people are actually truly searching for. They're looking for support. They need to be seen and heard, and they need a change of mindset and identity to move forward, but that the key is when you're looking for that label and belonging, what you really are looking for is support, to be seen, to be heard, to be given the tools and all of the things you need to move forward. Like I said, that change of mindset, the change of identity, and somebody or a group of some people to help you do that. And I'll also say this, some of it can start from within, and we're going to get to that in a minute. It all happens within, but it starts with reflection and introspection. And we're in winter season right now. And I shouldn't say winter season. We're like in the middle of fall, heading into winter, but we've had some of that weather going on. That's a perfect time to do these types of things because the world, we've got shorter days. The world is darker longer. Curl up with a journal or a piece of paper and write this stuff out. Write what you think is happening for you. The next thing I'm going to say, number 2, is go towards that discomfort. As humans, we are wired to go away from discomfort and pain and towards comfort and pleasure. That is one of the very deepest, oldest parts of our brain, the reptilian brain. That is one of its jobs. It's looking to keep you alive. And in that process, it's going to have you seek out comfort and pleasure and go away from pain. And that's not what you do to heal. To heal, you need to go in the direction of the discomfort and the pain. It's just, it is what we have to do. And there is power in that process. There is so much power in that process. It is a critical part of the healing journey. And I just said it. Healing is a journey. It's not a destination. There is no endpoint. We are works in progress, and we're continually striving to feel better and get better and be better versions of ourselves. I am the first to admit I am far, far from perfect. But every day I show up and I try to get better. I'm going to call him Martha Stewart here. Martha Stewart says, learn something new every day. Learn one thing new every day. For me, it's like not learn necessarily one new thing, which I think is great for your, keeping yourself mentally sharp. But it's like learning something about yourself. Learn something about yourself. And how is that affecting your life? Is it serving you? Is it not serving you? If it's not serving you, change it. If it's serving you, enhance it. Like there are lots of things we can do when we, do this, and again, it's like making the choices, make the hard choices. If you need support in those hard choices, recruit whoever it is you need to recruit to help you get through those hard choices, whether it's a friend, family, a coach, mentor. There's lots of options for helping ourselves achieve the hard things. And again, like I said, there's power in the process. You learn so much by addressing the hard stuff and addressing the pain and going towards the direction of discomfort. You learn so much. And that's stuff that you can't unlearn. Once you've got that, it's in you. And so that's a gift. That is a gift. And it's funny because I've had a couple of situations, and I'm not going to get specific because I don't want to call out the person who told me this, but it's like they had heard that some younger folks, we'll say they're probably in their early to mid 20s, heard my podcast. And it was one of the earlier episodes. And one of the things that they took away from it was like, it was one when I was like being very vulnerable, and I talked about my husband and I having an argument, not like an argument, like we were having they said it was an argument. It was a very emotional conversation. And it's like when I talked about putting the glass down and it the bottle, it was a bottle of tea and I put it down and it shattered. That's what they took away from it. Instead, and then it kind of became a source of gossip. And that's it. Instead of seeing the big picture and understanding the importance of the fact that it is important to have those hard conversations. It's important to have disagreements. That was a point for me when I knew that I needed to do some inner growth and some reflection. And I came out the other end awesome. But in their, I'd say, limited world experience, they chose to like kind of see it as like an, oh my God, and gossip about it, which I found fascinating. Like truly, I don't care. I'm like, been on this planet for 49 years. And the older I get, the less I care about stuff like that. I literally don't care about stuff like that. It's not important to me, but I just, from the clinician and, trauma and emotional, healing part of my world, I just thought it was very interesting and kind of reflective of their lives at the moment that's what they took out of that very emotional and vulnerable episode. So I just, super thought that was interesting. But, like there's so many gifts that we get from this. And yes, some of it sucks and it hurts and it feels bad, but it gives you the opportunity to learn and grow and teach yourself, teach your family, teach your kids, like so many awesome things. It also gives you the opportunity to be responsible and take ownership of your life and your situation. Because when we don't, all of our belief systems are things, beliefs and mindset are largely things that were ingrained in us, as kids. And we've talked about that before on, episodes a while back, but also decisions we chose to make, it's all us. We need to own things. We need to take responsibility. And that's one of the keys. And so we need to do the work. That is kind of like the end of, the final step. It's do the work and be okay with sitting in the space of discomfort and knowing and having faith that it will get better, because it will get better. And that's a big piece of the healing journey too, is having that faith, no matter what your belief system is. I think it's really important to believe in a higher power, because I find that the people who don't believe in a higher power and just say it is what it is, that's a hard world to live in. And it's basically, to me, it's like going through the motions of life without having, something to look forward to or have support. But, whatever that higher power is for you, whether it is a belief in God, whether it is, spirit, the universe, the divine, whatever you choose to call it, having that belief in a higher power and that support to help give you like that faith and that foundation is a huge piece of the healing process. And when I'm doing the emotional and trauma work, it is something that we bring into the process, and we use it as a tool because it can be a very, very powerful tool. So, and it can help you get through the difficult times. So yeah, do the work. My call to action, it kind of goes back to what I said at the beginning of this episode. I said I was going to leave you with a call to action. Those triggers, like I said, if there's something that I said in this episode that triggered you, sit with it and ask yourself why. Whenever I tell people to sit with things, I ask you to do it in a quiet, put the kids to bed, or if they're at school, or if you're at work and you have a minute, sit with it. Like, why did that trigger you? Because I will tell you, it is the seed, that you need to plant to begin your healing process. Another exercise I have people do is identify the triggers in general. Maybe it wasn't this, but maybe it was something else. If you're in conversations with people, if you find something triggers you, and you start ruminating on it, or if it triggers you and you just feel something in your body. Like a lot of people will say, oh, I felt it in my gut, or I felt it in my chest. Those are very real things. Those are a lot of what we work on when we're in the emotional and trauma sessions. So identify those triggers. What are they? Or if you're like in a life circumstance, if you're driving down the road, if you're somebody who gets, this is me, I'm talking about myself here. I used to get super duper duper irritated by people cutting me off or just doing things on the road that are just, all the things that are happening now on the road. And road rage, it's super interesting. That all used to bother me a whole lot. Now, I would say 90% of the time doesn't. I have done a lot of inner work, so most of the time it doesn't. But I will say, if I'm still having a bad day, it might cause that. I also, this is another little funny little caveat. I've also noticed that I tend to get more annoyed at those things when I'm the passenger and not the driver. So that made me start thinking down the rabbit hole of, why does that trigger me? That's a weird thing to be the passenger. And it's probably lacking a sense of control, right? Because when you're the driver, you can control at least your own car and how you respond. But, as the passenger, you can't do that. And so I identified that as something I needed to work on. And so I have been working on that. So it's really interesting. Identify those weird triggers. If there's so many, if you were to sit down and intentionally think about it, I bet you could come up with a pretty significant list of triggers. And that's something that I actually, when we're working on things, if somebody is feeling stuck in the process of some of the emotional and trauma work, I will have them do that, because if they work on that and I give them an exercise to help resolve it, each one of the triggers, that's something that really can be powerful to open your mind up and open your subconscious up to the healing process, which when we do the emotional and trauma and self-growth work, that's the area we're working on. So that is my call to action, and my challenge for you is to try to, identify some of those triggers and sit with them. And then when you have identified them, you can start to sometimes now understand the why, why certain things are affecting you. So that is it. In the next episode, we are going to dive into just what I said. We're going to be diving into how this process of, identifying with our, labels and diagnoses and making excuses for them is affecting us and our kids. That is going to be the focus of the next episode. And we're going to be talking more about, the adversity and examples of where it's showing up in our lives and it's not serving us. So I'm going to leave you with complete the call to action and the exercise, and it will open up a world of insight for you.
If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness, and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.